Good afternoon and welcome to this Criminal Justice Society meeting, this time with an interview about what polygraph examination is like and what it's all about. As I am not directly involved with this in a day-to-day sort of function, I thought I'd bring in somebody to talk about this who is much more intimately acquainted with polygraph technology. So if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your career thus far.
Afternoon, Doc, and thank you for inviting me. I always enjoy speaking with the Citadel Criminal Justice Society. Again, it's always like coming back home. So again, my name is Nate Brooks. I'm this month 23 years as a law enforcement officer. Um, Currently, I am assigned to background investigations and recruiting. I wear a lot of hats with the agency. Um, I'm the training coordinator for their crisis negotiation unit, and I am their polygraph examiner. Those two kind of have a gray area in the middle where they meld a little bit, but I spend a lot of my time conducting polygraph examinations. As of this morning, I've run 1,614 polygraph examinations. Um, Currently, I'm running a little bit over a 90% confession rate when it comes to criminal examinations. Also, on top of that, just to give you a heads up, not to toot my own horn, but just to give you kind of an idea of my background on this, I do teach advanced polygraph courses for the Department of Defense. So I'm all over the country teaching this stuff on a monthly basis. So it's a lot of what I do. I enjoy it. There's a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? There's a lot of mysticism out there about the polygraph and how it operates. So hopefully, Doc will be able to rectify some of that.
Of course. And honestly, thank you for being here. Thank you for giving us the time. And thank you for all the insights. Honestly, given your wealth of experience in this, I couldn't think of anybody more qualified to give their insights on this. So thank you so much for sharing everything with the Criminal Justice Society today.
Absolutely.
The- oh, thank you. So the first question is a basic one, but starting from the basic position, what is a polygraph test and how does it work?
So going back down to the very basics of polygraph, of course, if you take the two words, the derivatives of them, poly meaning many, graph meaning writings, many writings, which refers to the tracings that you see on a polygraph chart. Um, so the basics of a polygraph is recordings of physiological responses when viewed in certain question formats to give a percentage or a likelihood of someone either telling the truth about a specific topic or being deceptive about a specific topic. So it's actually a misnomer that it's a lie detector. It's actually not necessarily what you would call a lie detector, but it points in the direction. And the best way I kind of think of it is like a game of stats. It's a percentage. It's a percentage on whether or not this individual is telling the truth or not about a single topic.
Good, excellent. So when you say that it's recording multiple things simultaneously, what are some of the things that it's recording?
So your basic polygraph is going to record respiratory rates. Each individual has a standard respiratory rate. It varies from individual to individual. Roughly, most individuals that are healthy will breathe around 18 times a minute, with a ratio of inhale and exhale. As people are put under stressors, those change. There's also what's called the galvanic skin response. There's a misnomer that it detects sweat. It actually doesn't detect sweat, but our pores open and close as as stressors are induced. And what we're actually doing is there's two pads that are going to go on your fingers, or there's two pads that are going to go on your hand, and we're actually running a small electrical current through there. And so we're actually testing your conductivity, how much you resist electrical current. And then you have the cardiovascular system. The cardiovascular system, we all understand we've got a closed circulatory system. Our heart pumps blood throughout our system. So there's a blood pressure cuff that will go on your left arm. And it can't tell you what your blood pressure is, but it can tell you what's called relative blood pressure, which is increases in blood pressure and decreases in blood pressure. There may be additional channels depending upon the examiner. The American Polygraph Association does require at least one movement sensor. Generally, that is a seat sensor to detect surreptitious movements on the part of the examinee. Um, I also use feet sensors. You hear those old adages of the tack in the shoe.
Hmm.
People have tried to do that. So I have sensors down at the feet to detect any surreptitious feet movements. There's also sometimes I don't use these, but there's arm movements. Some examiners use what's called a masseter headset system, which is actually a set of earphones, and it detects movements in the jaw, clenching in the jaw. And then you also may have what's called a plethysmograph, which tests blood volume, and that may go on one of your fingers. So that's all the multitude. That's the multitude of channels that I can think of at this point.
Absolutely. And there's a couple there that I hadn't even come across yet. So thank you for being as forthright with that. So
Absolutely.
just to kind of like not to put too fine a point on it, the idea is that when you're undergoing a polygraph examination, that all these different senses exist there, and then fluctuations at each of these senses indicates a percentage likelihood of whether a particular statement is given to be a truth or something that's a non-truth in that sort of way. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I like that.
Excellent. So we'll come back to that point, particularly to do with some of the techniques that may or may not be used to try and
Yes.
deceive a polygraph examiner. But one of the things that I thought would be really useful for people who might be going through a career that might require a polygraph test is what to expect when you're undergoing a polygraph examination. So you come into the room. Can you take the audience through what to expect from that point out?
Sure. So the actual polygraph process in and of itself is should be, and I'm speaking from a professional examiner standpoint because that's the one, polygraph, just like everything else, gets a bad rap because of the human element. So from a professional polygraph examiner standpoint, coming into the room should look very sterile. That's not uncommon. Generally, you're going to see a polygraph chair. 95% of the guys and gals that come in there tell me it looks like the electric chair. That is perfectly normal. That's not its design to be an electric chair. You're not going to get shocked. Some people have come in and think that I'm going to stick them with needles or I'm going to put a colander on their head. You're not going to have to worry about any of that. You shouldn't see any of that in a polygraph exam. If you do, you need to turn around and leave. So you're going to have a gentleman or a lady that's going to introduce themselves. You more than likely won't see anything on the walls. If visual stimuli in the room can actually cause a problem with the examination in and of itself. So just to repeat myself earlier, it's going to be relatively sterile. You're going to have several waivers that I'm sure that you'll have to sign. We have a set of waivers that allows us to take the polygraph and to ask you a series of questions. You may also, more than likely, the examination will be video and audio recorded. You know, 15 years ago, people might have wanted to conceal that, but our actions are recorded every day now. Our officers are wearing body cameras, so chances are you're probably going to see the camera in the upper left-hand corner. So you can trust that the examination is going to be recorded, not just for the examiner's safety, but for your safety as well. So you'll go through a period of time where there'll be some background information just obtained from you, normal stuff. They may ask you about any medications that you may take. They're going to ask you things like how much sleep did you get the night before? Have you eaten? And these are all things that you want to make sure you want to be as normal as you possibly can going into a polygraph. You may hit on this a little bit later, Doc. Some folks will come in and if they take an anxiety medication, they want to avoid that. Absolutely do not. You want to be as normal as you possibly can coming into an exam. So you go through a period of just background investigation or background topics. The examiner is going to explain to you how the exam works. I'm going to explain to you how the instrument itself works. The examiner is going to point out all of the components that is going to be attached to you. At some point, the examiner will do what's called an acquaintance test, where the examiner may ask you to tell him or her a number between a certain range, and you'll write it down on a piece of paper. and he'll hang that, or she'll hang that on the wall, and they'll ask you a series of questions while you're attached to the instrument, and they will tell you purposefully to lie to the question that you've written on a piece of paper. And there's several reasons that that's done. It gives the individual taking the test to experience kind of a mini polygraph before the actual test. It allows for calibration. It allows to make sure that the instrument's working, and it also gives the examiner kind of a signature as to what a lie looks like for this individual. So, and then at some point, you're going to go over your questionnaire. Any pre-employment exam, sometime beforehand, you will have a questionnaire that's probably got, I know ours has about 80 questions on it about certain things in your life. You should go over that questionnaire question by question with the examiner, make any additional changes or statements as necessary to make sure that whatever's on that piece of paper is the absolute truth. And then once you get all that done, the examiner will let you know what the questions are going to be on the exam. And then you'll actually go into what's called the instrument phase, where they ask you a series of questions while you are attached to the components. And then depending on the policy of the agency, the examiner may give you the results shortly thereafter. They may give you the results a couple of days after. It just depends on the policy of the agency. So that's in a nutshell what to expect on an exam.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That was a very thorough description. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. You already touched on this briefly, but I wanted to give you the latitude to be able to go into this in as much depth as you want.
Mhm.
But what shouldn't somebody do before a polygraph test?
Let's see here. What shouldn't you do? I would say Google it, but the way we are nowadays, if I'm gonna make a pie, I'm gonna Google how to make a pie. We Google everything, which is fine. If you do end up doing that, just be very wise in what you're reading, because there's all kinds of crazy information out there. So I'll be wary of that. One of the things I would also be wary of is some men and women feel like they need to do something additional to help them pass the test. They feel like they've got to breathe a certain way. They feel like they've got to move at certain times. They'll see the stuff on the internet. You can buy a CD that claims to tell you how to pass a polygraph every single time. And the guy who made that CD went to federal prison for making that CD. Wow. So an individual by the name of Doug Williams, if you ever get a chance to look it up, but he's got YouTube videos out there, still out there, claiming to be able to tell people how to pass it, even if they're lying. I would avoid that stuff. I would avoid trying that stuff. Generally, one of the waivers that you may sign coming into a polygraph examination is that if you do end up doing something to alter the physiological responses during the test, you're going to be booted from the process. Polygraph examiners, they talk all around the state, all around the country. Background investigators are constantly calling us up, asking how someone did on an exam. And one of the waivers that you have probably signed up to this point allows agencies to share that information. So you've probably signed that already, even if you don't know you've signed it. You've probably signed it up at this point. So I would definitely avoid trying to do something, even if you're coming in being 100% truthful. Some people just want to try to do something to help themselves out. Avoid that at all costs. That would be one thing, or another thing I wouldn't do. And then also get a good night's sleep and eat a good breakfast. If you drink coffee in the morning, drink coffee. If you don't drink coffee, don't drink coffee. It's some folks will come in and say, I've had caffeine for 48 hours, and all they end up with is a headache. And it actually makes the charts look worse. So be your absolute normal self coming in there.
Good, excellent. Is there anything that you recommend doing besides having a good breakfast and making sure that you're as consistent as possible? Is there anything that somebody can do to prepare for a polygraph examination?
The examiner, or a good examiner, is going to finalize that preparation before the exam. That's why the thing takes so long. I would love to be able just to plug somebody up to the matrix and ask them a few questions and I'm done with it. But that's not the case. Everything up in the exam is preparation for someone to succeed on that test. So other than, again, getting good sleep, eating well, answering all the questions on chances are you've probably done the questionnaire earlier, answering all those questions with as much detail as you can. The examiner should take care of the rest of the preparation once you get in the room.
Good, excellent. One of the questions that I continually get with regard to polygraph examinations is the influence that being nervous might have on the potential findings. Could you talk a little bit about whether being nervous impacts the results of a polygraph examination?
The nervousness itself doesn't impact the results of an exam. Those nervousness and fear of being caught are two different responses. So they're going to look totally different. The only time nervousness would cause an issue is I have had individuals that are so nervous that they can't follow instructions and cooperate with the exam. They can't sit still. They can't focus. That's the only time that I've had, and these are, I would consider these severe cases of anxiety. And again, that's going to be part of a good polygraph examiner. Most people are suitable candidates for an exam, but there are some people that are not suitable candidates for an exam. I had a young lady that was so claustrophobic that she couldn't wear the chest tubes. So, and that resulted in horrific charts, and they're totally unusable. So she's not a suitable candidate. So if you were, the only time that nervousness would cause the issue is if you just could not sit still during the test.
Interesting. So if somebody is not a suitable candidate, then are they able to proceed in the hiring process, or is that it for them?
They should still be able to go through the hiring process. It's just going to land eventually in the adjudicator's lap, and they're going to have to decide, are they comfortable hiring this individual without an exam based upon the background investigation up to this point. It is improper for an employer to, how can I word this, to disqualify someone based solely on the results or the inability to submit to a polygraph exam.
Interesting. Thank you for clarifying that. It's one of those things that I haven't encountered thus far,
Yeah.
but it's something that would be good to have some details on, just in case it's relevant to anybody.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So the next set of questions are to do with the results. And so I've got a couple of different questions that I'd like to ask you about the results. One of the questions that I often get posed by people is that it may take several sessions to come to a conclusive polygraph test because the first session produces results that are inconclusive.
Yes.
What does that mean? What does it entail? And how common are those sorts of things?
So as there is with any medical exam, and I don't want to call this particularly a medical exam, but a diagnostic exam has a level of inconclusive rates. There's never any type of exam or test that is 100% all the time. So there is an acceptable level of inconclusive rates per examiner. Now, and I will say that inconclusive rate goes up a little bit whenever you're talking about the pre-employment test. Because of all the exams that we conduct, the pre-employment is actually the most difficult exam because it's a screening exam. I'm not asking like, a bad guy exam. I'm asking them if they did bad thing and that's it. But with a screening exam, I'm asking this individual about their first 21, 35, 40 years of life. So you've got the brain running in all different directions. That in and of itself is going to increase the inconclusive rate. So an inconclusive is not necessarily a bad thing. If you end up with an inconclusive test and the examiner has to bring you back either that afternoon or a follow-up session, that's not a bad thing. That means you didn't fail the test. That means that more than likely what the examiner, what he or she saw was, maybe there was again, it depends upon the person. Where they just have an inability to focus on multiple things at one time, and for whatever reason, this particular question didn't fall within the realm of either deceptive or non-deceptive range, and they'll bring them back and they'll start to focus on these particular questions that they lost due to the inconclusive finding. I've brought people back as many as 3 times to clean them up, and then they end up passing the exam.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, everybody's different. To say you can put everybody on one test and have it done every single time, it's just impossible.
Interesting. No, thank you for that.
Mhm.
Next question I've got is more of a specific one, and I completely understand if you can't give a direct answer.
Mhm.
But what happens if you ask me a question and I don't know the answer to it? So, for instance, if you ask me what my height is and I'm unclear on precisely what my height is, and I give you a guess,
Mhm.
would that read as inconclusive, or would that be something else as far as your interpretations go?
If the test itself is designed, you've got to have an answer before you go into the examination. So the polygraph does a really good job at certain things, and it does an awful job at other things. Um, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. I can tell you right now that I'm wearing a black tie. I absolutely know that. But if someone asked me to do a polygraph on whether I like Dr. Fisher, you know, depending upon our relationship that day, it might be a yes, it might be a no.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if it does great with the concrete, but it does awful with the abstract. Absolutely does awful with it. So a good examiner is going to focus on those concrete facts. Um, to asking someone if they're 5'8" and they don't know, if the person can't give you a hard solid answer, it's an improper question to begin with. Now, a way to resolve that, if we're using the 5'8", kind of example, let's say I know I'm no taller than 6 feet. I know I'm under 6 feet. Then you could kind of alter the question a little bit. Are you under 6 feet? Something of that nature, using that example. So
Excellent. Now
I'm sorry, I apologize. We got a little bit of a delay. My bad.
No, totally my fault as well. This is one of the challenges of trying to use Zoom to conduct these sorts of things, but
Yeah.
so far so good on how everything's going. But yeah, that's an absolutely invaluable thing to know about these tests as well, to get a feel for these sorts of things. Because one of the questions that I often get asked is about those sort of like demographic type things.
Mhm.
So for example, the way that height is measured during college for sport, for athletes and stuff like that, is different than heights measured for the NBA and those sorts of things. So there might be worries about just one of those demographic questions for establishing baseline, that there might be an issue there. But it's good to know that there are other options there and opportunities to clarify.
Mhm.
If you're in a test and the examiner asks you a question like that and you're uncertain, should you voice that uncertainty towards the examiner, or should you attempt to just answer the question directly?
Absolutely. Just I would make sure that the examiner is aware of that. Um, the test itself is designed and conducted for the truthful person. A lot of folks think that it's again a lie detector. It's actually designed and executed so that the truthful people will pass. So I'll give you just an example. Um, if let's say if an applicant has smoked marijuana in the past, um, if you don't know the last time that you smoked it, I would do something to like what we were talking about earlier. I know that I didn't smoke it in 2017. I know that's the last time I smoked it. But I would tell the examiner that if they don't know the answer to the question, to tell them I don't know the exact answer. So then it puts the onus on the examiner to find a way around that question and still get a good solid answer that is acceptable for the agency.
Good. No, thank you for that. That's some fantastic advice.
Mhm.
Just as sort of like a worst case scenario kind of situation as well. And again, this is one of the most common questions I get asked.
Mhm.
If you go through a polygraph examination and you don't pass, is there
Mhm.
any recourse that you have as somebody who went through the examination to question the findings or anything like that in any way?
It's going to depend upon the agency. Um, there are some agencies where that's it and it's final. There are some agencies where you can request another quality control. Like just as an example, for us here, we use mandatory quality control. So it's not just me making the determination. There is a second individual that's doing what's called a blind score. So this would be a second examiner that knows absolutely nothing about the background investigation, doesn't even know the identity of the individual taking the test, is just simply looking at the charts. So it's a very neutral way to determine whether or not an individual is passing a test or not passing a test. Um, the agency, again, depending on their policies, may offer another examination later on. It depends on what happens once the test is complete, and if there's any admissions or if there's any reason to suspect that the exam itself uh, was accurate. If someone comes up and fails a test and then they make a statement, well, I told you an overt lie. Well, I mean, the test worked. So
No, excellent.
that's the best way I can think of to describe it.
No, no, that's really great. And again, there's going to be a lot of variation, not
Mhm.
just within the state, but across states as well and across agencies. And I imagine over time as well, not being able to see into the future, I'm sure this is a very dynamic process.
Mhm.
Question again, one that you may not be able to answer is, are all suspected deceptions treated equally, or are some questions, if you were like a vanity lie, would that be treated the same way as something that's over a more serious thing?
You were broken up. What type of lie?
A vanity lie. So like let's so go like saying something like lying about something that doesn't matter, or having potential deception over something that doesn't matter versus something that is much more serious, like to do with drug use or some other
Mhm.
criminal activity. Are all deceptions treated the same way, or is there sort of some understanding in that way built into the process?
You know, it, I would say it's handled more on a case by case basis. Um, the shotgun approach, yeah, we're looking for fairness. Don't get me wrong. I mean, but if you're talking about someone who maybe inadvertently told me something that was incorrect versus someone who made an overt statement of lying, um, those are two totally different things. It also depends on whether the individual is a certified officer already or not. If there's a good a little bit more expectation of someone who's already certified, because if they're applying for another agency and then they get caught in a deceptive situation, that may affect their career at their first agency, because you may have some type of Brady or Giglio issue that comes into play. So if that's a whole nother topic in and of itself. Taking an exam and then showing deception on it, and then not being able to testify in court later on if you're a certified officer. So again, that's a totally separate issue that I know that more than likely we won't have to deal with here at the Citadel.
Absolutely. And what you're touching on is like how many ways that the polygraph examination can be looked at. And I think that that's what's saying in this. It's like we're focused more on the hiring process with this particular video that we're
Mm-hmm.
recording together right now. But this can be used in a number of different ways for a whole bunch of different purposes, which raise their own particular issues to do with this.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that, if you had to take your first polygraph exam to become a police officer, is there anything that you wish that you could have known, that you wish that you could know before going in for the first time?
Not really. I've had to take over my career. I've taken 5 of these things. I've taken several for the military, and then I took several for law enforcement, and I even took one while I was a polygraph examiner. So I mean, which is very odd because I know exactly what's going on the other side of the computer, and the the one that I was most nervous on was the one where I was a polygraph examiner and I knew everything that was going on.
Hmm.
So the easiest ones were the ones where I had no idea.
Hmm.
Um, you just it's a situation where and it feels awkward just to trust the person in the room, but the process is truly designed for the truthful individual. So it's really just a matter of the limited preparation. Again, I know I keep saying it: sleep, eat, be normal, go in there and follow the instructions that the examiner gives you to the T.
Excellent. No, thank you for that advice and that sort of way. Just as an aside on that, just and more out of professional curiosity to myself, let's say hypothetically you're in a situation as somebody who's trained in being able to do this to the highest standards in this country. What would you do if you noticed the examiner wasn't doing something by the book in that sort of way? Would you broach that in the actual interview itself, or would you do it after the fact?
Um, More than likely, I would not broach it in the interview. Um, there's, ethics is a big thing in the polygraph profession. I would be lying to you if I didn't say I can do things on a test to make people pass a test. I can do things on a test to make people fail a test. So it there are definitely some ethical considerations when conducting the examination because there is that human element involved in it. If something comes up where you believe that something unethical was done during an exam, I don't think addressing it during the exam is going to resolve an issue. I would definitely notify the agency. There are professional organizations also. We Here in South Carolina, polygraph examiners are licensed. So there is an entire division at SLED that is dedicated to the polygraph unit. There are folks there that you can talk to. You have professional associations like the American Polygraph Association, along with the American Association of Police Polygraphists. Those are the two major associations for polygraph law enforcement examiners. You can notify those folks as well.
Excellent.
Mhm.
I also wanted to give you an opportunity to dispel many of the urban legends and myths
Mhm.
surrounding polygraph examinations. You already touched on some of them, like having
Yeah.
a tack in one shoe and all these sorts of things. What are some of the myths that you've come across that you'd like to dispel now so we can try and
Yeah.
undo some of these myths?
So I guess one of the big ones is, of course, now polygraph in the pre-employment realm is different than polygraph in the criminal realm. Some folks will say, well, you can't use it in court. Why are you doing it anyway? That in and of itself is a misnomer. It falls under all the rules of evidence as anything else does. And I'm sure you go over this, Doc, in some of your classes, the Daubert rules of evidence, which set up the federal standards for rules of evidence. And you've got the five Daubert rules. It falls under those. So I've actually testified three times to polygraph findings in court, not information that was derived from them, but the actual charts in and of themselves. Now, I will say it is very difficult to get a polygraph into court, and quite honestly, we try to avoid it just because of the complexities of it. But it's to say that it can never be used in court is a misnomer. Now, there are a couple of states that do have statutes limited to them to say that it won't be used. South Carolina is not one of those. There's, I believe it's Arizona that gives a blanket rule that says polygraph can be used in court. So they use it all the time. So it's different in each state. So that would be one of the misnomers. Again, it's not really having to do with pre-employment exams, but it's something for the overall, again, mysticism of the exam. Um, Countermeasures don't work. Um, in fact, a colleague of mine and I just did a recent study in lab in regards to countermeasure processes. We attempted more than 40 different countermeasure types to include the old tack in the shoe, biting the tongue, mental countermeasures. Um, it doesn't work. As long as the movement sensors are in place and they're functioning correctly, and you have an observant examiner, um, the countermeasure is still going to result in a very poor examination. So again, I would highly recommend that your students totally avoid that whatsoever. Um, Other misnomers about the polygraph. Um, I would be remiss if I told you, and I can't remember if I said this earlier. It's definitely not 100%. If you ever find something that's 100%, I want to buy stock in it.
Hmm.
Um, it is not 100%. I'll be the first one to tell you. Now it's much better than a flip of the coin, and I'm right many more times than I'm wrong. So I would throw that out there as an exam. There are different types of exams that a pre-employment may take. You have your law enforcement pre-employment exam. You have what's called a directed lie screening test, where they're actually going to ask you to tell lies during the exam. These are both different types of tests, different in varying degrees of accuracy. But the big thing is just to follow the instructions of the examiner, and you'll be fine.
Excellent. One last question to you. If you could change one thing about the polygraph process, looking towards the future and the sort of like the ethos of constant improvement,
Mm-hmm.
what would you like to see change? What would you like to see implemented in the future?
Um, for myself, maybe more standardization across the profession. We as a profession, we have a tendency to preach that a lot, but we're not very good at it. Um, so I would like to see more standardization. Um, I know that there's some research being done at multiple universities to increase the accuracy already. Um, there's research in regards, and this is being done at the University of South Carolina. Dr. Vendemia, I believe is her name. She's doing some research in regards to the MRI and lie detection. The only drawback to that is it's very expensive, millions of dollars in equipment. When I'm working off of $7,000 worth of equipment and getting better responses, so but she's doing some great work there. There's some great work in lie detection and eye movements. There's some great work being done still with linguistic analysis. So um, the field in and of itself in polygraph is actually under a smaller or under a larger field called credibility assessment. And so the government, the federal government, which is this is really cool because the federal government works this program out of Columbia, South Carolina, at Fort Jackson, where they not only just polygraph but multiple methods of detecting deception among people. So I'd like to see some maybe interaction with other means of credibility assessment to increase the accuracy of the process.
Good, excellent.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's some exciting avenues for research there in the future to try and continually improve these methods, and it looks like there might be some exciting changes to come in years yet ahead.
Oh yeah.
Um, Before we close things up for the day, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to bring up anything that you'd like to bring up,
Mhm.
to address any questions that you think the cadets should know about polygraph examination, or to talk about anything to do with polygraph examination that you'd like to get out there in the world as well.
Hmm. Think. Um. As far as maybe the job in and of itself, I enjoy it. I really do. Um, it's definitely a special niche, and it takes a certain individual. Um, I'm not saying I'm special or anything, but this is just something that I really enjoy. I enjoy speaking with people. I enjoy um, trying to figure out why people do what they do. Um, if you ever get into this field, a lot of what polygraph examiners do is we end up dealing with a lot of sex offenders, individuals who will commit these type of really heinous crimes. So you end up learning a lot about the human psyche and what people are capable of. It's a great field to be in. One of the drawbacks to it is if you get good at it, you're going to get stuck in it. So if you're looking for, if you want to be a chief or a sheriff somewhere one day, polygraph might not be the best thing for you. But if you enjoy the one-on-one, if you enjoy the 3D chess that you're playing with some of these bad guys, because there's some very intelligent bad guys out there, um, this will be something to look in for you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your candidness with all of the questions, and I'm sure this will be a great help to many cadets to come that will go through this process as well. Thank you for everything you've brought forward, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Oh, absolutely. You ever need anything, you guys are always, guys and gals are always more than welcome to hit me up at the police department. Email, call me, text me. I'll be more than happy anyway to help you any way I can.
Excellent. Thank you so much.